And we as the TESOL Greece Board, thank you for your support. We'd also like to mention the sponsors, Goethe Institute for their hospitality, our gold sponsor, Europalso, Burlington Books, New York College, the British Council Athens, South Athens, Educational and Training Consultants, Express Publishing, People's Cert, Oxford University Press, TESOL International, IST College, DERE, the American College of Greece. We'd like to also thank our advertisers and all the people who have exhibitions upstairs. Please make it a point to visit the exhibition today. Make it a point to be here at 12:45, because we're going to have our annual General Assembly where we need to elect next year's board. Ioana, our Vice Chair, will introduce our very special plenary speaker this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome from me also on this very nice day, sunny. Well, it is a great pleasure at TESOL Greece every year that we get to have presentations by great contributors to the ELT field. One of them has been and has had a massive influence and still has from her also position of Vice Chair via TEFL, Vice President. You have your programs, as I always say, so you can read about it. But I don't want to take any more time. I will introduce to you Carol Reid, kindly sponsored by the British Council. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Joanna, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session. And first of all, congratulations for getting here with the marathon. You know, it's brilliant. About half an hour ago, I thought there would only be 4 of us, and we would go and have a cup of coffee instead of actually doing a plenary session. And my topic with you this morning, reflections on how to be a highly effective teacher in revolutionary times. Okay, that kind of revolutionary thing that we are evolving at revolutionary pace, and we have to keep up at our peril. And actually, my focus of what I'm going to be talking about this morning is not so much on the kind of techniques and technical professionalism of the classroom. What I want us to be focusing on more is the kind of attitudes, beliefs, traits in a teacher that make us the most highly effective possible. And I would like to start my session this morning with you with a little story. And the story you can see here, this is a kitchen and a kitchen sink. And the story is about a woman, a middle-aged woman, in her flat, and her tap in her kitchen sink doesn't work. And she has lots of initiative, and down she gets into the cupboard, fiddling around with the taps and the tubes. And at the end, she feels, actually, I can't do this. I have to call a plumber. So she phones up the plumber, and along he comes with his plumbing bag and his blue overalls, and he bends down, looks at the tap, and he opens his bag, and he takes out a little hammer. And under he goes, tap, 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 and it starts working. And the woman is absolutely delighted. And the plumber gives her his bill. Exactly. And it costs £50. £50. She is absolutely outraged, completely furious. And she asks the plumber for a more detailed invoice. And this is what he gives her. And isn't that true for us as professionals? That actually over time and through the kind of competence and experience that we build up, we learn to know where to to tap. And I would like you just, with the people next to you, just to take 30 seconds or so to think about what are the sources for you of learning where to tap. How is it, and what is it through that you build up your experience and competence and professionalism? For example, through reading. What other things? Take 30 seconds to chat in Greek, English, or any language that you like with the people next to you. Okay, fantastic. Time's up. Time's up. And if you don't mind, I use my little tambourine, which I also use with my children. And when they hear the tambourine, they know that we come back together. Okay, would you like to just call out a few things? Any order, just call them out. Okay, absolutely. Observations. Observing. What else? Share, exactly. Workshops, seminars, sharing experiences. Absolutely. Okay, so all these things. Conferences, of course, that's the first one for us to mention this morning. Courses, our experience, of course, social media, colleagues, okay, internet, action research, and I'm sure you may have thought of other things as well. And actually, at one point, as got mentioned yesterday, we have this kind of input from all these sources, and we build up our experience, and hopefully we are also engaged in a reflective cycle. Reflective cycle, something that is very familiar to many of you. There are many different models. We could look at Schoen, we could look at Tom Farrell, we could look at Donald Freeman. Actually, one that I particularly like because it was what started me on the road as a primary teacher in the first place is this one from Andrew Pollard, this is obviously the updated edition. But through reflective practice, we become better and more competent teachers. And I think we have to see reflective cycles as something that is successive. It's a series of successive cycles. It is also a dynamic process. And it's a process that is to do with us making creative insights from all the input we get through reading, conferences, courses, all the rest of it, and through actually having systematic curiosity about the gap that exists between what happens in our classroom and what we would like to happen. So it is to do with research, but it's grounded research. It's research that is to do with our own actions, behavior, performance, everything in the classroom, not necessarily academically valid research. And of course, if we engage in this kind of reflective cycle, which actually we do naturally anyway, even if only formally when we're on a kind of teacher education course, we go through various stages of developing competence. And this model, which comes from the last century, and I'm sure is familiar to some of you, but I think it's a very useful way of situating where we are as teachers. And so to start with, it helps if you press the right button. Unconscious incompetence. So this, if you like, is a kind of state of blissful ignorance. In a way, you're not even aware of the skills you need to do it. For example, someone who thinks, they love children and walks into a class of 33-year-olds and is not even aware of what they need. So the unconscious incompetence. The second level, where there's conscious incompetence, where we are aware, my goodness, there is this whole skill set that I need to learn. It's a kind of help I really need this kind of stage. And moving on to conscious competence, a kind of stage where, yes, we can do it, but it's not automatic. We really need to think about what we're doing at every stage, and sometimes we can do it, and sometimes we can't. And the last stage, of course, stage 4, the unconscious incompetence stage. The kind of stage where you plan your lesson on the back of a metro ticket on the way to work, okay, and it's almost as automatic as riding a bicycle, going into your classes and teaching. And of course, there has been speculation about what a stage 5 might look like. What would you imagine a stage 5 might look at? Any guesses? Inspirational, absolutely. Okay, well, one suggestion has certainly been enlightened competence. But I'm afraid there's also another suggestion that we have to guard against quite a lot, and that is that stage 5 might be complacence. And I think we all know the case of teacher with 20 years experience. And that 20 years of experience has actually meant doing the same thing every year. I know we're not like that as teachers. You wouldn't be here on a Sunday morning if you were. And I certainly feel that after 30 years of teaching in the classroom, that actually it's important from time to time to step back and think about what it is that makes us really effective and successful. And before we look at that, I would just like us to briefly consider, just very quickly, some of the features of teaching in the 21st century. Okay, which are obvious, they're not rocket science, they've come up already several times at this conference. But first of all, knowledge and knowledge. That's a good one, isn't it? Okay, knowledge and technology explosion. We know that apparently knowledge was doubling at the rate of every 25 years after the Second World War. It's now been doubling every 12 months and apparently is due to double in every 12 hours. It's kind of extraordinary pace, and we need to keep up with it. And because of the need to keep up with it, there are also higher expectations that we should, as educators, we should be at the forefront of all of this. The second point, the status of the profession. I don't know about the Greek context, but in many contexts, teaching is a profession that doesn't have a particularly high status. It's not like being a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. It's not perceived like that in society. And this is something that we as teachers are working against all the time. Think back to somebody like the book No Logo. Naomi Klein, sorry, I just couldn't bring her name there. Naomi Klein in No Logo. She says, societies pay for what they value. So we only have to think about teachers within that to know how they are regarded as a profession. So we have to be constantly asserting our professionalism. Public scrutiny and accountability. Again, I don't know about Greece, but I do know about the UK and I do know about Spain. And very often, teachers get the blame for a whole lot of things that are wrong in society, that have causes elsewhere, but there needs to be someone to blame. And the accountability factor is often provides a huge amount of stress and pressure on teachers. Perceptions about good teaching. Because you know something, the fact of the matter is, despite all our digital revolution and fast-moving changes, there is actually still quite a traditional and conservative view about what good teaching involves, mainly to do with compliant children sitting in rows and being filled up with knowledge by a teacher. And these perceptions are obviously still grounded there, and we're also very often still living in a situation where the design and geography and environment of our classrooms belongs to the 19th century, where our teachers have the mentality of the 20th century, and our learners, of course, are born mainly these days in the 21st century. So these perceptions which are changing. We also, of course, have the changing paradigm of teacher. Actually, this has been going on for many years, but in a way has come to more of a head recently with the move from the teacher as sage on the stage to guide on the side, and how to do that in the context of all these other things. And the last point there, the essential need for continuous development. Sorry, water break. Continuous development and learning. You know, I think when I started out as a teacher, you might choose to be involved in your own professional development in great detail, or you might not. But these days, it's actually no longer an option. We need to be, because of the way things are changing so fast. And of course, what we also see these days are changes in models of instruction, from this kind of traditional classroom model to this. And this is to do with the whole advent of learner management systems, the whole monetization of the education industry. Did we ever used to talk about education as an industry? And also the whole thing to do with actually software being able to replace teachers in certain jobs, but actually, you know, the sort of dull routine marking type of thing, which may be all very well, but are increasingly seen as perhaps not necessary at all. I mean, I know we made light of it yesterday. Would there be TESOL Greece next year? Of course there will be TESOL Greece next year. But if you read some people's blogs, if you read Philip Kerr that Jeremy mentioned yesterday, or you read Steve Krashen's blog, you will certainly get a strong sense of teacher as endangered species. And we also, of course, are living with changes in the semantics of educational discourse. I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail, but I find it very interesting that the way the technology industry, if you like, has actually taken ownership of some of the vocabulary to do with teaching and teacher education that had quite different meanings in the past. You look at a word like personalization, for example. When I started out as a teacher 30 years ago, personalization meant interactions between students and teacher, peers and peers, interaction with another human being. Personalization these days refers to algorithms in software which is able to adapt the kind of exercises that you do on the computer to your exact level. Similarly, a word like interactive, oh, sorry, I slightly explained that wrong. Okay, interactive used to be to do with interaction between teacher and students, between human beings, and now tends to relate to interaction between the students and a device. So we're seeing those kind of changes as well. Similarly, autonomy, there are plenty of other words like that. And so what this has made me think, in the context of all these changes, actually, what is it? What are the fundamental, essential ingredients that we need to be effective teachers? And this has led me to devising my reflective teacher wheel, which includes 8 essential ingredients. And I'm going to kind of talk you through this wheel now. We're going to discuss some aspects of it and so on. And as a kind of global task for the session, I would like you to think, what would you add to this wheel? What would you take away from this wheel? This is very much my personal wheel. It's based mainly on experience, but also, of course, on reading and input from all kinds of different sources. So here is my first letter on my reflective teacher wheel, and it starts with M. Any guesses for what M might stand for? Oh, you're brilliant. Okay, absolutely brilliant. But no, it's a part of it, though. Any other ideas? Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so M in my wheel stands for mindset. It stands for mindset, and I would just like to briefly talk about 2 aspects of mindset. First of all, in relation to our mindset as teachers, and secondly, in relation to the mindsets of our learners. And the first thing to do with us as teachers, and to do with our own self-awareness and metacognition, and our development of our metacognitive skills. That John Hattie, as it came up yesterday in one of our panels, he believes that one of the well, from his meta-analysis, evidence for, although that has been questioned, but anyway, that teachers who believe that they are agents of change in their classrooms, that they can bring about fundamental differences to the learning and lives of their students, are the ones who are most effective. And as teachers, we have choice about how we think about things, how we think about our job, how we think about our students, how we think about our institution, how we think about the curriculum that we have to follow, and so on. And actually, for us as teachers, it's important to take hold of that and to actually be reflective about our own thinking and attitudes and beliefs in the classroom. And of course, as you all just pointed out, when I mentioned the word M, this relates crucially to motivation. And motivation, for most of us, I think we immediately think of the work of Dornier, okay, on motivation, and this quotation that he quotes from William Arthur Ward: if you can imagine it, you can achieve it. If you can dream it, you can become it. In other words, we have choice over the kind of teacher that we are. And also, by the way, anyone who's familiar with NLP will see the relationship of this to the Walt Disney vision strategy. And I find it quite interesting that those 2 sources of talking about that, Dornier's empirical research and NLP, rather different, but they both actually say the same thing. And I would just like you to try this little task now of a teacher identity tree, and this is based on some materials, actually for students, that Jill Hadfield and Dornier have developed. And what I would like you to do now is to just, in your notebooks, could you just draw a tree with about 3 branches? And on the branches of your tree, just 3, okay, because we don't have much time, I would like you to write 3 adjectives, okay? Well, they don't have to be adjectives, but they probably are going to be adjectives, of the kind of teacher that you aspire to be. So maybe creative, flexible. You decide. Just 3. Off you go. I'm giving you about 15 seconds. Okay, would you like to just show your tree to the person next to you? Compare the adjectives you've put. Oh gosh. Okay, fantastic. What your homework is from this session I'm not going to take feedback from this, but your homework for this session, when you're going home on the metro after the marathon, draw more branches on that tree and write the kind of teacher you would like to be and have a look at it before you go into class on Monday morning, okay? And believe in yourself and believe in it. Because of course, the kinds of mindsets, values, principles and beliefs that we have are all the things under the iceberg, under the volcano, if you like. And these kind of beliefs and choices that we make in terms of what we can achieve as teachers actually produce the kind of habits and behaviors that we use in the classroom with our children. And this little anonymous poem shows it quite vividly, I think. So it's watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your Absolutely. Okay. So that's it's at quite a populist level, I agree. But actually, if you want to dig deeper, there are important psychological foundations here. And I think the real message is take a grip of our own metacognition. Very often, we're focusing on developing our students' metacognitive skills. Let's look at our own. Now, thinking about mindsets in relation to our students, I'm thinking of the kind of critical mindset we want to develop in our students, the kind of creative mindset we want to develop. But above all, I'm thinking of this. I'm thinking of developing in our students a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. Now, as many of you in the audience will know, I'm sure, this is based on the work of Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University. And Professor Dweck's research relates to how people respond in the face of setbacks. And what she has found is that people who have a particular mindset respond to failure by giving up, whereas others are willing to persist. So for Carol Dweck, and again, just go and Google this if you're interested in following up, because we have to be very brief now. A fixed mindset is to do with the kind of belief that your intelligence and your talents are fixed. They're something that you've got or haven't got. This means that when you make a mistake, this is because you don't have enough intelligence or talents. You're not good enough, so you give up. It's a kind of helpless-oriented attitude towards learning. You can't do it, you give up. You don't try. And this contrasts with a growth mindset, a growth mindset where you have an implicit idea that actually your intelligence is something that is flexible and depends on your effort. And so mistakes are challenges that you think, actually, this is because I haven't been working hard enough, I haven't been making the right kind of effort. And if you like, as opposed to helpless-oriented, it is mastery-oriented. In other words, that challenges become opportunities to try harder and to succeed. And what Carol Dweck says is that these mindsets are very much formed by the kind of feedback that we as teachers or as parents give to students. And so, for example, this is a little bit of, I'm not expecting you to read it, it's a little project about comparing two dolphins, but you might see that the kind of feedback that is evaluative, what a fantastic project, you're a very good writer, is actually, okay, that's lovely for a child or a student to hear, but what it encourages is this fixed mindset. You're a good writer, but actually next time you may not be so good, and that means you're not a good writer. So that our feedback needs to be actually focusing on the processes that have gone into the work, and recognition of the persistence and effort there. So here, for example, the information is clearly organized. I can see you've worked hard to find out about the different dolphins. Now that's just a snapshot view of fixed mindsets and growth mindsets, but I actually believe, especially for those of us working with young children, it is fundamental to work on the kind of feedback and praise we give to children and to students to develop these mindsets, and also to have the growth mindset ourselves when it comes to things that we find challenging in our own teaching, for example, implementing new technology. So, moving on in my wheel, I didn't even give you time to guess, because I'm aware of the time here. R for rapport or for relationships. This is just fundamental. It has always been fundamental, and it's not going to go away. That the rapport, the state of mutual responsiveness that you have with your students is crucial for underpinning learning. Somebody yesterday, I think it was Misty, talked about a task, where they asked teachers to remember the teachers they had. And very often it's to do with those relationships. A few years ago, when I was interested in emotional intelligence, I did a survey at a school, a state school in Madrid that I was working at the time. I got the class teacher to administer the survey, not myself. What makes a teacher special for you? And this was actually based on a survey I'd seen done by Michael Berman with adult students. And the children responded to this. And I think it's important for us to listen to the voices of our students about what they believe is important in creating this kind of rapport. And these children, there were 200 of them in a school in Madrid. They were aged 6 to 12. And they said quite clearly they want a teacher who is kind, caring, funny, listens to you, makes you work, tells you off if necessary, but doesn't get angry or shout. And I found it very interesting, the difference between the older children and the younger children in that survey. The older children wanted someone who explains things well, is patient, treats you equally, has no favorites, and doesn't go on and on. So that was really very, very clear. Okay. And I always love that quote. It's in that Veronica de Andrés book. No, it's not her book, sorry, Jane Arnold. Veronica de Andrés wrote the article. Children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay, so rapport, absolutely vital. And of course, we all have our different teaching personas and go about it in different ways. And one of the things we also need to be able to do is to build up group rapport, because it's one thing to have individual rapport, and it's very important to do that, and particularly often with key characters and personalities in the group who you know might tip things one way or the other if there's not a good relationship there. But group rapport is very important, and there are lots of little techniques for building up group rapport. One, for example, is where students find similarities with each other. So this little activity now, which I could have you running to either side of the room, for health and safety reasons, I'm obviously not going to do that. So we'll just have hands on heads or arms in the air. Okay, and I'm just going to ask you which kind of person you are. So if you're a cat person, hands on heads. If you're a dog person, arms in the air. And then I would just like you to look around, find someone who is similar, and tell each other. Okay, so are you cat or dog? Okay. Let's try another one. Are you tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? And talk to someone. Okay, okay, lovely. One for us as adults. Are you beer or wine? Okay, one more for the teacher educators. Are you teaching children or adults? Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so those kind of similarities there. I mean, there are other techniques as well. For example, asking questions to which there are universal answers. Okay, so I want you to shout yes or no. Okay, so are you enjoying TESOL Greece? Yes! Okay, you got it. I don't even need to ask another one. Okay, but that is very bonding. Have you ever tried with children, not just getting people to put up their hands if they know the right answer, but also to put up their hand if they don't? Okay, so I want you to put up your right hand if you know the answer, and your left hand if you don't. Notice the way I automatically, I can't help it, it's in my genes, go to show you which is right and which is left. Okay, which elephant is bigger, Asian or African? You put up your right hand if you know the answer. You put up your left hand if you don't. I want to see all those hands up. Fantastic. Okay, so actually everybody has their hand up in the classroom. Other things, of course, pacing and leading and getting on the same level of your students. I don't know how many of you teach children here or young learners. Could you just have a little wave? Okay. So you know that kind of thing when you come into a class and they're all kind of looping about all over the place. And you come in and from the minute you're in there, you're going, sit down, be quiet, get your books out. You're going against the kind of energy. They've got lots of energy. So why don't you go with their flow and take them where you want them to be? So for example, you might do a little rhyme like this. Can I get you all standing up? Okay, so are you ready? Right. So first, touch your toes. Next, run on the spot. Then stretch your arms and bend a lot. After that, look up. Stretch your arms up high. Imagine you can touch the sky. Finally, relax. Sit down and then sit down and then Close your eyes and count to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good morning, children. Please open your books at page 36. Okay, so one other thing on rapport. We're going to have to go really fast with this. There is actually nothing like synchronicity in moving and breathing in a group to create rapport. And very often we can do this through a song, okay? And a song, so we're just going to try this now with a little bit of singing and movement. And I have to say that because I'm being filmed, obviously for copyright reasons, I can't use a kind of pop song, obviously. So I'm using one of my own songs, but I just want to do it so that you just feel the idea. So this is a song that, for example, you've been doing a unit of work on healthy food and eating like a rainbow. You know, if you eat fruit and vegetables of every color of the rainbow, you will get all the nutrients that you need. Yeah? Okay, so I'd like you all to stand up, please. And obviously we would have done other work on this song. I don't need to play the whole thing. Okay, now this is an opportunity because actually this song has the rhythm of bachata. Do you know bachata? Ah, you do. Okay, so bachata. So let me see your bachata skills. Is 1, 2, 3. Close the drawer with your hip and 1, 2, 3. 1, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you can do a square. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Alternatively, you can do some of the lovely Greek dancing that I've really enjoyed learning. And you just sing, okay? And I also have, but for time's sake, I think perhaps I'm not going to do this because we really are but I have fruit, okay? So that the children, so I'd just like, these people in the front row, would you just like to take a fruit each? No pressure, eh? But just turn towards. Okay, so we'll just do a verse or so to get the idea. Okay, so off we go. Are you ready? Very lovely. Yes.
We eat fruits and vegetables in every season. They're delicious, but it's not the only reason. Fruit and veg have calcium, minerals and fiber too. Fruit and veg have vitamins, and they're good for you.
One more verse.
Some fruit and veg are red, some are purple or blue. Some fruit and veg are orange, some are yellow too. Some fruit and veg are green, and some are white. Fruit and veg keep you healthy, happy and bright. Ooh, 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 ooh. Fruit and veg grow in the summer, autumn, winter and spring. You eat them cooked or raw, on their own or with something. Some fruits have got a stone, some fruits have got seeds, and they have lots of nutrients that your body needs. That your body needs. We eat fruit and vegetables in every season. They're delicious, but it's not the only reason. Fruit and veg have calcium, minerals and fiber too. Fruit and veg have vitamins, and they're good for you. Yeah, they're good for you. Yeah, they're good for you.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay, so group rapport through songs and stories, of course, can have a similar effect. And I think you know, this quotation by Maya Angelou is just so true. They'll forget what you've said, they'll forget what you did, but they won't forget how they made them feel. Okay, that is kind of crucial. Okay, moving on to our next E. There are actually 2 E's in my wheel, and I'm beginning to need to go at super fast pace here. Can you guess what the first one is? Oh, you're so wonderful. I need another space on my wheel, because that is it's crucial. And I would also say empathy is kind of, it comes under the rapport umbrella, but yes, 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 I agree. Okay, I'm going to put you out of your agony. E refers to engagement. And we heard about engagement yesterday from Jeremy, and we even had a very similar image. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. This is fundamental in our role as teachers, to make our students thirsty for learning. At the end of the day, we can't learn for them. That's not our job. We need to make them thirsty for learning. And engagement is to do with the, what is it to do with? I have this wonderful quote from Mark Burns and Anthony Griffiths. It's to do with the fertile soil that makes learning sustainable. So it's that growth, that kind of flower image, if you like, the blossoming. And we need to have that sustainable. And engagement has a number of crucial ingredients. And we're not going to talk about all of these in a lot of detail, but I think it's important for us to unpack what engagement means. It's one of those words that trips lightly off our tongues as educators, but we need to think what it means. And engagement, we need curiosity. We need to stimulate curiosity, but not just curiosity that has a peak and goes off, that we maintain. Relevance, what's in it for me factor. Why do I need to bother about this? There must be a reason. Goals, are these clear? Are they worthwhile? Are they things that I can relate to? What level of challenge is there? There needs to be a challenge, but is it so difficult that I'm going to give up? Or is it so easy that I'm just going to get bored? Feedback, crucial. And feedback not just at the end of a unit, at the end of a term. Feedback as an ongoing, integral part of the process. Competence, a sense of I can do this. And obviously behind that sense of I can do this is the teacher systematically building up the skills and strategies that students need to be able to do it. Engagement, to do with having choice. Choice that may be micro choices to do with what exercise I do next, what homework I do, how I do my homework, or more macro choices to do with the curriculum. Enjoyment is important. Of course it is. Enjoyment, humour and fun. But it's not the only thing. And actually students see through us if our lessons are only fun and enjoyment and not about learning. And of course, when we have all of these things, we hopefully lead our students to a state of flow where, you know, the chick sent me high, man, flow, where we have our emotions are positively harnessed to the pursuit of learning. And the other thing that I would add there, which I saw for the first time in John Hattie's book, Visible Learning, and I just thought, oh, good. At last, someone is talking about this in a way that is not kind of cheesy or, you know, there is evidence for passion okay, being an ingredient in getting our children, our learners, our students engaged. That actually you give off that enthusiasm and passion and you get it back. It's mirrored and reflected in the children. So, moving on very fast. S. Anyone? Somebody said it. Oh, stamina. Oh, yes. I'm definitely going to add that to the wheel. Okay, stamina, absolutely. Wonderful. No, S in my wheel refers to support. And the reason I haven't put scaffolding there is that it didn't fit on my PowerPoint. But what I'm really talking about here is scaffolding. Okay, scaffolding, as we know, is the concept from Jerome Bruner to do with building up children's independence in being able to do particular tasks. And in Vygotsky's term, to do with leading them across the zone of proximal development. And scaffolding, what's important about scaffolding is the temporary nature of the construct, the fact that you can take it down or put it up as needed. And also important is Bruner's handover principle. So if you like, it's the teacher continually taking a back seat to enable students to work independently. And it's interesting that this concept, of course, was originally developed in terms of very small children and their first language. But people like Van Leer and Pauline Gibbon have also written about the importance of scaffolding in an English language teaching context. And Van Leer, in particular, talks about 3 levels of scaffolding, going from macro to micro, or global to local. So you have a global level of scaffolding to do with your overarching aims and outcomes, an activity level to do with the way you scaffold individual activities, and a local interactional level. And something that I find very useful, both for teachers when I'm training teachers and also for myself, is the concept of distancing strategies. So the strategies that we use with our students to be able to scaffold them to new levels of independence. Now, this slide I'm not going to go through in detail, but I've just put here 3 examples. You imagine a storytelling activity, drama. Let's just look at the storytelling one. Low level of distancing. What's in the pictures? What color's the dog? You know, all that kind of low-level questioning. Medium level, actually looking at the relationship between pictures. I'm thinking children here in a story. And the high level, going beyond the story, the kind of hypothesis kind of stage. And actually, if you have that concept of distancing strategies, it can help you not only plan stages of your lesson, but also respond to individual students within your group with a level of distancing that is appropriate for their stage of learning at the time. And as you do this distancing, we're also thinking of that local interactional level of scaffolding that Van Leer talks about. Everything we do, part of those 1,500 decisions, I would say we make every lesson, not every week or whatever it is. You know, the way we recast, get children to repeat, ask again, ask in another way, respond with feedback to the meaning of what a child has said, and so on. And actually, Van Leer says, and I won't read this out, but you can read it there, about the importance of local or interactional scaffolding may actually be the driving force behind good pedagogy, the hallmark of a good teacher. And I think that's really crucial. It's not just, the stages of your lesson. It's everything that you do to bring it alive and bring it together. And concepts like distancing strategies can help us with that. Okay, I is for, we had it yesterday, I think. Okay, no, you've got lovely ideas. It's not really fair because this is a very personalized wheel. I is for impact, okay? And this is very much based on the work of John Hattie, whose work is fantastic. There is criticism, you always have to take any of these people's works with a sort of health warning, but at the same time he does have some very useful messages for us. And one of his strongest is know thy impact. And he uses biblical language to express it. It's so important. And this is to do with the teacher being a receiver of feedback constantly, but not just being a receiver of feedback, but actually acting on it. Okay, so having this kind of obsessional curiosity about what is making the learning work for our individual students and getting the feedback in, the ways that we do give and get feedback. But I would also like to suggest that not just focusing on the content of the curriculum in terms of language structures and vocabulary. And I would suggest, actually, and this is borrowed from, you can't quite see the reference down there, 4H model of life skills, that we need to look at the impact we are having on our learners, not just in terms of head, thinking skills, language knowledge, and so on, but also in terms of heart. No hole in the heart there, by the way. This is a this is a real heart in terms of effective relations and so on. Also in terms of this third H, hands. Hands is to do with how we work together, how we collaborate, how we cooperate, how we respect each other, listen to each other, share things, and so on. And finally, the last one to do with health, and health thinking of areas particularly like self-esteem, maybe anger management, dealing with stress, all these kind of dealing with pressure, all these things that we need to be measuring our impact on as well. So measuring our impact, hugely important. The next one. Any guesses? I love it. Absolutely, love. It's got to be there. Okay, but mine, I'm afraid, is a bit drier. Okay, and it's actually to do with the language of learning. And what I mean by this is actually sharing with our students and giving them the means to talk about their learning, to reflect on it, to understand it, to take ownership of it and be able to talk about it. I find it, I love it, but it's also very empowering when you hear a 6-year-old child say, well, for homework, I'm going to do some research on the Vikings. And it's kind of, okay, that's a trivial example, but actually giving our students the language to talk about their language, to develop their metacognitive awareness. So here, just some examples, random kind of examples, but very often, this is the vocabulary that we ring-fence off for us as teachers, but actually it's highly useful for our students to be able to talk about that as well. Okay, moving on, super fast. Here comes the second E. And the second E is to do with expectations. Expectations, they really are a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you go into a class and you feel you've got a class of no-hopers, you sure will have a class of no-hopers. If you keep your expectations high, the chances are that your students will respond to those expectations. I always think of 5-year-olds, when I teach 5-year-olds, that they're practically ready for university. They're so grown up compared to 3-year-olds. And actually, if you treat them like that, they respond. And keeping expectations high is very important. Our students nearly always know more than we give them credit for. They nearly always can do more than we ask them to do. And they nearly always, those of us especially working with children, have more sensitivity and maturity than we give them credit for as well. So keeping our expectations high is hugely important. As this little poster that I noticed going around on social media recently shows. Okay, so keeping those expectations high. My last thing on the wheel, I've got there, don't worry. Whoever's flashing time signs at me, I'm nearly there. Okay, and the last one is C, and, No. Okay, the last one is C for collaboration. And collaboration in two senses. Actually, these days, in these fast-living technological times that we live in, collaboration with our peers and our colleagues is more important than ever. We can't go on being teachers in our, well, not ivory because that's academic, but our concrete towers. We need to collaborate, and these days we can do it so easily with social media, with our personal learning networks, with lovely events like this conference. We can get together, we can talk to each other, we can help each other, and this collaboration is something that I think we should build on systematically and look to each other for support and give support as well. And collaboration, of course, is also to do with the kind of relationships and empathy that we set up with our students in the classroom. Actually making a collaborative atmosphere. It's inclusive. This is our classroom. We do things together. It's not I'm the teacher, I want you to do this. This is us on a joint venture, and showing through your behavior, through your feedback, through the way you value your students' efforts, that working collaboratively and working together is part of it. Of course, not the whole time. Of course, there are opportunities for individual work as well. But collaboration is key. Okay, so there you have my wheel. And being a primary teacher, I've, of course, made my wheel. Okay? And I would actually recommend, any of you who are teacher educators working with trainees, get them to make their own wheel, to think about the ingredients that are fundamental and crucial for them. And I'd like you to do that as well. Over the coffee break, we can have a chat afterwards. What would you add to this wheel? What would you take away from it? What are things that are particularly to do with the Greek context, which I don't know about, which I may have overlooked, and which would be super important for you here? So a very quick recap. Can you remember what they are? This one. A bit, come on, a bit loud. Rapport! Okay, right, okay. Fantastic, 100% tick. Okay, you've really got it. Okay, lovely. And actually, as I said at the beginning of this wheel, this is not academic research. This is grounded research, if you like, through my own experience, reading, life as a teacher, if you like. And I would just like to end with this little quotation from Van Leer, which I think is so important. Intangibles are often more influential than tangibles. Okay, if you can't see it, that doesn't mean it isn't there. If you can't count it, that doesn't mean it doesn't count. And you know something, we talked about this in relation to testing, that testing very often measures things that are ultimately not that important in a child's development and growth. Similarly, I mean, I love reading about academic research, don't get me wrong, but very often research, because of the empirical way that it needs to be done, maybe focuses on things that are actually not at that real heart of what it is that really matters when we're working with a group of students, no matter whether they're 3-year-olds or 93-year-olds or well, 93, I've never taught 93-year-olds, but anyway, anywhere else in between, business students, teachers, whatever. So, I hope it's given you food for thought, healthy, nutritional, organic thought, and thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, from the microphone as well. And Elena Baltuna for the British Council is here to share a few words with us. Thank you, Elena.
Hi, Elena. Okay. Shall I go and sit down?
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you, Carol, for this very, very inspirational presentation. That was honestly a lot of food for thought. I think that, as Carol mentioned, it's really important to go into this growth mindset, not only professionally, but personally. I think this is something always that it's really needed to, in order to move forwards and to make new things and make progress. We are very happy for this presentation, and thank you very much, Carol, again. And British Council always wants to support TESOL Greece initiatives. Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.